Hello, movie nerds. Welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Vesper. This is a sci-fi drama film that came out at the end of September, and this one is very interesting to me, or at least the trailer looked very interesting to me. Now, I didn't really look that much into this film after I saw the trailer. I just immediately put it on my to-watch list. I knew that I wanted to see it when it came out. It looked incredible, and the premise of it sounded really cool. And I will have to say Vesper is probably the biggest disappointment in film for me so far this year. And I say so far because God only knows. So Vesper is basically every trope about sci-fi that you can possibly fit into a movie is fit into Vesper. We have destroyed the Earth's ecosystem. All of the rich people are now living above the earth in places called citadels, and then all of the poor people are basically struggling to survive on an earth that can no longer really support life. So plants don't grow the way that they used to, crops don't grow the way that they used to, and a lot of kind of how people are surviving is that they're learning to biohack plants and sort of create new crops, create their own crops. So one of the things that is sort of a big point in this movie is that the rich people have created seeds for crops, but they only last for one season. So for instance, you can't collect basically new seeds from that year's crops in order to plant a crop for the following season. So it all really comes down to being able to biohack or bioengineer plants that you can grow kind of all year round. And essentially the people that are on the earth are like starving, they're very ratty, they're very dirty, they're living in squalor and that sort of thing. Whereas I imagine the people on the Citadel are very pampered. You get the idea. So here is where Vesper fell short for me. The concept and the visuals of this film, the cinematography, how they set up this apocalyptic world is absolutely incredible to see. I think they filmed most of, if not all of this film in Lithuania. I know portions of it at least were filmed in Lithuania. And it is a post-apocalyptic world that I don't think we've seen in films at this point. Most of the post-apocalyptic films that I can think of, it's like a desertous place, a la Mad Max, or it kind of looks like The Last of Us, decaying buildings and things like that. Whereas Vesper is very much like swampy, it's muddy, the buildings are like decaying, there aren't very many of them, so you don't see skyscrapers and things like that. And then there are all of these what I assume to be bioengineered like creatures and things. There are some, I guess creatures, I don't know, drones maybe that fly over like in the sky over people. And you kind of get the feeling that you're trying to stay away from them, but it never explains to you why that is or what they would do to you if they did find you. It kind of reminds me of a couple of other films, but none of this really kind of is cohesive to me. So I did not make it the entire way through this film. It is 2 hours long. I want to say I made it about halfway. So I made it probably about an hour into the movie before giving up on it. And I will tell you, I gave up on it because it is just, not only was it very slow and very boring to watch, but nothing is really explained that much. I was 40 minutes into this film before it's even mentioned that the main character, Vesper, is a girl. Like, literally, there's nothing before that at least I can remember that tells you that she's a girl. She has a boy's haircut. She dresses like a boy. And in this movie, you don't see women. You don't see other girls. I think to the point that I saw in the film, there are 2 other girls that you see in this film, but there are 2 grown men and like a prattling of teenage and younger boys. So I just assumed that Vesper was a boy, like a 12 or 13-year-old boy. And it doesn't really mention that she's a girl until much, much later in the film. And that is kind of one of the reasonings why this movie just fell flat for me. There was so much time, like for a 2-hour film, and to not like be really introduced to the characters, to not be given any backstory about them, to not have any character development of any kind really, or anything that explains to you what's going on, what's happening, why you should care about anything. It's not there. It's completely lacking. But on the other side of it, Vesper is stunning to look at. Like the way that they created the world, a lot of the shots that went into it are incredible. Like if Vesper could run as a desktop screensaver and you could just watch the scenery of it, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And some of the like plants that they created remind me a lot of the movie Avatar, where they are light up, you know, they're incandescent, they're very cool looking. Some of them look like actual light bulbs. They dance, you know, and kind of move in a way that plants that we would be familiar with don't do. But there's little to no explanation as to how those plants exist. I understand that the whole movie is about bioengineering, but you don't see any of that actually taking place. Nobody ever explains how it went from the world that we know now to this bioengineered, completely foreign world of the future. And not only that, but there are these creatures. I don't know if they are just all called jugs or if just the one that you see in the film is called that, but they're basically like non-intelligent bioengineered human beings that typically are not meant to look like very human-like. Like you're meant to know that you've seen one when you see one. But then there's another character that ends up crashing from the Citadel. Her and her father crash onto Earth, and she basically runs into Vesper to like help her get back to this other Citadel. And it turns out she also is this bioengineered human, and that if anyone on the Citadel where she was living found out, they would just immediately kill her. But it doesn't explain why that is or, you know, what the danger of these creatures might be. You never get any of that information. One of the cool things about this movie is that they did cast Melanie Gaydos as the creature Jug in the film. And if you are not familiar with her, I would definitely Google her and I would look her up. She is amazing. She is a fashion model who is very famous, and she does some of the most incredible fashion photography that I've seen. If you guys are familiar with like photography or you enjoy that at all, you will definitely want to check out her stuff. She was born with ectodermal dysplasia, and so she basically has a condition, and they basically just cast her as this creature looking how she looks every day, all of the time, to be this bioengineered human being. And I love that they gave like an opportunity for her to do that. She's been in a number of different films, and she's been in some music videos for bands. I know she was in one for Rammstein, I believe. And I absolutely love that they took the opportunity, instead of doing some kind of creature creation, to showcase how absolutely awesome she is. But other than that, Vesper was just not a win for me. Like the character of Vesper herself is fine. There's nothing particularly notable about her other than she is quite young and like does understand bioengineering and stuff. But for the most part, again, like I said, they never explain anything to you. Like they lose power at her home where she's living with her father at one point. But it's not like it's almost like the generators or something are run on some sort of black goo, and they never explain what that black goo is or how it's made or why it powers things. Like there's so much information that's left out that it's hard to actually get into the story or understand what's going on or like give a crap about what's going on. And for me to have made it an hour into the movie, I'm halfway through basically, and nothing has happened that makes me even remotely interested in continuing to watch other than amazing cinematography. That's just not a win for me. And it's such a shame. Like, I had such high hopes for Vesper, specifically because it was a completely unique idea. I mean, yes, there are a lot of tropes in it that we are very, very familiar with. But as far as Hollywood right now, it's basically just cookie cutters, remakes. There's nothing that's original. And Vesper stood out as being like an original sci-fi drama to me, but it fell short. It fell so short. Like, there was so much here that I feel like the majority of the budget for this film was definitely on doing the CGI, if there was any. I'm assuming that there was, or like some of the shots of it. But other than that, the story itself, like the script itself, just was flat. It was so flat and just not particularly interesting. So this one for me, unfortunately, is not a win. If you really like sci-fi and you really are interested in bioengineering and that kind of thing, maybe you would understand this movie a little bit better than I did. But again, it doesn't really even explain the bioengineering portion or how she's doing any of this. Like, it shows off some of her plants, but that's about as far as it goes. At least an hour into the film, that's about as far as it goes. So those are my thoughts. I would be interested in hearing yours. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family. You can find me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episode.